Hey folks, this is Lucid, and I'm going to do something I haven't really done before. I've done guides and whatnot, but I have not really done a guide focused for new players. So we're going to do that. We're going to do a guide focused for new players, and we're going to do this through a single player playthrough, which is how most people get exposed to the game. I'm going to do it without any mods on, so it's going to be completely vanilla, because that's also how most people are going to start the game. Yeah, we're going to play on a map that you will probably have. We'll play on Pelluer, which is a nice map. We're going to play with probably one underwater nation and probably about six or seven, probably about six land nations. And so we'll call this new player game. We're going to play in the early age. I think the early age is a great... I mean, there's a lot of... You can start off in whichever age you like. Early age is a great age to start off for playing Dominions. And part of the reason is because you don't have to worry as much about communions and whatnot in the early age. Early age tends to be a nation with higher path mages, like more powerful mages, that can kind of do things on their own. They don't really have to do things in conjunction with other guys or gals. And it's also kind of fun because it's more fantastic in ways. We're going to play on... I would suggest when you start to play on normal. Normal is a pretty good difficulty setting. We're going to play on difficult because I don't want to have... I'm going to show you... We're going to make it at least a little hard for me. But I want to show you... I don't want to show you on like Mighty and stuff because you'll have to... Mighty, like once you're experienced, I think Mighty's a good level to test your skill on, like to practice games, because you'll get enough resistance from the AI you can kind of simulate a human without having complete hordes of chaff coming at you. But we're going to play like this. So we're going to do 6 players, and you hit in, and it's kind of weird. You can click here too, or hit in to add a new player. I don't... There's probably some way to delete it, too. I wonder if it says... Yeah, backspace. Okay. And we want to set almost all these to be random land nations. So we're going to hit Shift-L. And if you hit question mark at any time, it'll pop up all the main hotkeys for whatever menu you're on. So here we can see Shift-L, capital L, is going to restrict most nations to land. So we're going to do that. We're going to make one underwater nation. Let's make them Atlantis. That will be kind of cool. And then we'll do... for ourselves, we're going to play Niefelheim. And that's not just because of the snowy background. I think Niefelheim is one of the best nations to start with as a new player. And the reason is because there's a lot you can do and learn. In some ways, Niefelheim is a nation that can act as a blunt instrument, meaning you can just, do some basic things, and those will generally work pretty effectively. You don't have to, do really fancy stuff. And you can also do some sort of fancy stuff, like thugging and super combating, which are some of the fun things to do in the game. And that's basically just where you have one commander who's really strong. And anyway, you can do all of that with this nation, and those are it's kind of like getting your feet wet with some of the complexity that's in the game. Meanwhile, if you want to stick with Niefelheim and play them a few games, you have really complicated stuff you can do too, like turbo communions and fluffing and all of this other stuff. And I'm not going to talk about what those are in this game because we're probably not going to do a ton of it, especially not at the beginning. Niefelheim is a pretty cool nation. It's a nation of cold-loving giants. And the biggest and baddest of them is the Nifel Jarl. And this is a huge size 6 frost giant. And he has cold power, which means whenever you're in an area that is very cold, he's going to get bonus strength, attack, and defense based on how cold it is. And he's also, because he has ice protection 3, he's also going to get bonus armor, potentially up to 9 bonus armor in cold 3. The way temperature scales work in Dominion is it can be neutral, or it can be cold 1, cold 2, or cold 3, or heat 1, heat 2, heat 3. So, yeah, this guy's really big and strong. And we have the Jotun Scrotty, which is basically a guy that can turn into a werewolf, which is pretty cool. And they also can blood hunt. And I don't know how, we'll probably get in a little bit to blood hunting. But the basic way that the magic system works in Dominions is you're going to need gems to cast a lot of your spells. Gems are kind of the gold for magic. And an exception to that is blood. And with blood, you don't get gems. You actually have to harvest some people from the local population and convert them into blood slaves, which you can use for all of your various blood rituals, sacrifices, what have you. We also have the Gaija, and the Gaija, this is going to be a reasonably complicated unit to use when you're new, because there's not a ton of obvious things you have to do. Like, a lot of times they're going to fluff or jump in communions or do some kind of buffing. There's going to be some basic stuff we can use them for, so I'll show you how to use these guys. But this is a unit that will probably be much better in the hands of an experienced player, whereas the Scrati and the Niefelheim you can probably use pretty well without really understanding the game too well. And here we have the Jotun Jarl. There's basically a bunch of other units. They're all pretty cool. Down here, we have a bunch. We're not going to go through all of them. There's some pretty cool Jotun warriors. They're size 4. The way size works, I know I mentioned size 6 before, but the way size works is you can have up to 6 size worth of units per square. And the bigger you are, the higher your size, generally the more hit points you're going to have, the stronger you are, the harder you hit. But on the downside, you're going to have fewer of those units per square. And so that's a trade-off. So with the size 4 unit, you can have a size 4 unit plus a size 2 unit in a square, but we don't have any size 2 units. So there's nothing to really fill in the gaps here. A few things of note. We have the Hurler, who's a really good sieger, and that's pretty important. It means we can crack forts pretty easily. So we'll be using a few of those, but yeah, I mean, these are all pretty solid units. I'm not exactly sure which one we're going to get. We'll worry about these later. Just know these are pretty okay. So we're gonna have to, the way when you start, once you pick your nation, you have to pick what your god is going to be. And if you're playing single player, you can get away with a lot of things. If you're playing multiplayer in a new player game, you can still get away with a lot of things. But if you pick something really dumb, you're going to get punished. In an experienced player game, you can really just be checkmate if you pick the wrong god. So, and it's not quite that simple, and a lot of times you won't know because you don't know what other people are going to take. But based on what somebody else takes and what you take, it can just be like the cards are hidden and then they get revealed at the beginning of the game. And if somebody goes on you, you could kind of be checkmate. We could get a lot of different things. One thing we could get is we could get an Immersil and just take regen, and that would be really cheap, and we could take it awake, and that would be great. We could also take a Monolith, and we could get regen plus like some magic resistance, and then maybe some fire shock resistance, because one of the things that all of the Neefel giants have is they have a shock weakness, so it'd be kind of nice to get around that without having to forge gear. And yeah. So these are some options for taking a bless. I haven't really talked about the bless. So it's probably a good thing to cover that here. Most of our units are not sacred. And you might say, sacred, what does that mean? These guys are not sacred. If you look at all the tags that are on a unit, they're in this row right here. And these are all like the modifiers for the unit. These guys, like I mentioned, are weak to lightning. They're resistant to cold, and they have snow move, because we're a cold-themed nation. They do not have a sacred tag here. Who does have a sacred tag is this guy, the Neefel Giant. And basically, the Neefel Giants and the Scrati are sacred to Niefelheim. And what that means is, depending on what you pick for your god and what bless attributes you pick, you will get a certain benefit when these guys are blessed. And so you can basically use the bless system to customize sacred units. So it's kind of, like most of the units are not customizable except your sacred units, and they are. That's kind of a way to think about it. Another way to think about a bless is a lot of the effects, but not all, a lot of the effects you get on your bless are things that you can get later in the game by having, some kind of mage cast a spell on a unit. And you basically are going to get that early because you don't have to research it or anything. You don't even have to have a mage with the army. You just have to have a priest to bless the guy. So anyway, When we're picking like these, if we picked these guys, we would get certain paths which are going to open up a certain bless. So if we got this guy and we got nature 7, we could pick up regen. And then if we got this guy, we could pick up nature 7, and we could, this would be more expensive, a lot more expensive, because we would get fire shock resistance, and then we could get some magic resistance. And which one's better? I don't know. It depends. It depends. But anyway, it's not overwhelmingly expensive, but it's sort of expensive. The other thing you have to pick when you're in this screen, so you pick your paths that are going to go on your god up here. And once you have picked your paths, then you can pick your bless. And so the amount of blesses, like the bless that you can get, is going to be dependent on what paths you have picked. And yeah, to get anything to, like if I pick one water, you see I don't automatically get a water point down here. You have to put at least 4 in something to have the points pop up down here. There's an exception to that, which is if you put 3, and watch what happens when I put 3. If you put 3 and the 4 on the left, these are the elemental paths, you can see they all pop up here. And so now I can put bless points in each of them. Likewise, if you put 3 and all of the points on the right, you can see death and blood pop up. But if I take 1 blood away, they all go away, because you have to have 3 in all the sorcery or 3 in all the elemental paths to get those bless points made available to you. But if you put 4 in anything, you get bless points. Okay? So that's kind of how the bless system works. And like I said before, just to repeat myself, these the things you get on your bless are going to get basically dumped onto your sacreds when you bless them. And there's a few things to get into a little bit of complexity that will go on your sacreds even if you haven't blessed them. And we're not going to cover that in detail, but just know they exist. Yeah, okay, so we've talked about the bless, and I think we'll do that. Well, I think we'll do this. There's more options you could get. Generally, they're organized by how much dominion you start off when you pick them. So like these things on the top, you start off with 4 dominion. So if you look down here at candles, that's what that means. Dominion 4 means you're going to have at least 4 candles in your starting dominion. You're going to have 4 dom strength, basically. And you can increase this, but you cannot decrease it lower than your max dominion. And normally you want to higher is better, generally. If you pick these guys down here, these are generally the rainbows, is kind of what they're called. And these guys, they start off with 1 dominion. So if you want to have a high dominion score, it's usually better to pick these guys at the top, because it gets really expensive to have a high dominion on these guys down here. And one of the other things I should mention is that each point you go up in magic paths, when you're picking these things, each point you get is more expensive than the previous. So to get the high, like if I go all the way up to 10, it gets way more expensive. And then getting the first path is also sometimes expensive, sometimes cheap. So if we take a rainbow, for example, like this Scrotty is a rainbow. Every time I get a new magic path for him, it costs 10 points. So it's really cheap to get a magic path. But if I go up here and I look at like a Titan, this guy costs 60 to get a new magic path. So you can't, the Titans really punish you for getting multiple magic paths that are outside of what they start with. Once you have gotten the first path, then after that, it starts like a normal, I think 15, 20, I don't actually know the scale. Just know that it gets more expensive every time you go up. But it's like if you start with Earth 1, it's trivially cheap to jump it up to Earth 2. And pretty cheap to jump it up to Earth 3, but by the time you get to jumping it up to Earth 4, it would be pretty expensive. So yeah, that's basically the pretender archetypes, or not the archetypes, but the classes. You basically have the immobiles up here, and almost all these cannot move on the strategic map, but they have high dominion score and are relatively cheap. Down here at the bottom, we have the rainbows, like I was saying, and these typically have very low cost for new magic paths. So they typically have a very broad variety of paths, but they typically don't go super deep in any one. And they also typically are going to have low dominion score. The low dominion score is going to affect how fast your dominion spreads, and your dominion is kind of like the influence of your god, and it will spread throughout the territories. So the lower your dominion, the slower it spreads. It's kind of a way to think about it. It's also going to impact how many sacreds you can produce. So if you only have one dominion score, you can only make one sacred unit out of each fort each turn. And by building a ton of temples in your empire, you can actually increase that limit, but that's kind of how it works to start with. Dominion 2 is mostly monsters, and most of these expand. And what that means is they're going to be able to take provinces controlled by independents at the beginning of the game. And yeah, that's kind of their job. Some of these are not really expanders, like the Bog Mummy is not really an expander. He's kind of like a Dominion 2 Titan. We'll talk about the Titans in a second. But most of these you can get to expand. Some expanders actually can't expand. The Solar Eagle can have a lot of trouble. The Raven of the Underworld is hard to expand with, but you can. But a lot of these things can expand. But it's kind of weird. Just don't assume just because you got an expander they can expand. The ones that can expand well can expand regardless of the bless you put on them. The ones that don't expand well, they typically need the assistance of a bless, and then they have to only expand in places where basically you have your dominion. Because if you take your god out of your dominion, they don't get the bless on them. And I know I'm hitting you with a ton of stuff, but one of the things that's just a brainless expander is the Earth Snake. But in cold, he's not as good, and that's because he's cold-blooded, but we won't get into that. One of the options you can take is Niefelheim would be taking something like this, stacking up a bit of defense, because our guys actually do get pretty good defense in cold, and taking regen. And then we could expand with this guy. That would be kind of fun, actually. And we might do that, because we're playing against the AI. And then this third class is Titans. And the Titans, these expanders, they don't have a lot of item slots. Like, you can't put a sword and an armor on your wolf. But you can on these guys. But they're usually like size 6 giants and things like that. So they're usually very strong chassis. But some of them, like this guy starts off with gear. But a lot of them start off kind of naked. Or in this case, very naked. And because of that, they're usually going to struggle to expand until you put a little bit of gear on them. This guy starts off with a little bit of gear, which is nice. So anyway, this is kind of a rundown of the pretenders. The easiest thing is if you go to any of the guide places where there's, guides for a nation, you'll see suggested pretenders. You can just pick one, and it may not be the best, and people who spend a ton of time playing this game will get all vexed because some guide doesn't have the ideal pretender, or, in their opinion, it's a horribly wrong pretender, but it's going to be good enough for you if you're starting out. We're going to take, in this case, I think the Monolith is a pretty solid build for multiplayer and whatnot. It's pretty good. This will be fun, though. We're going to take this guy with regen and defense 3. And this is going to make our Neeple Jarls very, very tough in combat. We're going to make it so we can get 5 Sacreds a turn. This is a pretty good amount to get. And we're going to get... we're going to get some growth, because growth... I guess we should go through this in order, though. Order Turmoil is basically how much... basically how safe and orderly your lands are. And this is going to affect how easily you can marshal citizens into your army. So things which don't take a lot, like army units which you want to make, which take a lot of citizens per se, but they don't take necessarily a lot of armor, you're typically going to want a lot of turmoil. A lot of order. If you are going to instead have units that are going to require a lot of resources, like a lot of armor, you're going to need more productivity. So that's these two. For Niefelheim, like these guys, they take... Does it not show? Well, they're recruitment limited. I forget what they're recruitment limited to. 31. They're about balanced for a lot of these. We'll probably be okay here with just those. I think what we're going to do... Oh, we have an expander too, so we're going to be getting resources reasonably quickly. I don't know if we want to go all the way to 3. What I think we'll take... And our researchers here are pretty solid. I think we can take drain. So we have cold. This is going to determine the temperature. With Niefelheim, you probably want to take cold 3. There might be, I can't remember. With Niefelheim in particular, their dominion spreads cold. I don't know if that means you can get away with taking not cold 3, but anyway. We don't really have the points to take luck. I don't really want to take misfortune. I think this might be okay with 4. We don't need a ton of dominion. Well, maybe we'll bump it up a little bit. A lot of times you want to either go for luck, you want to go luck 3, or tank it and go misfortune. We'll go misfortune. We'll have some bad events. I guess we'll do this. We'll balance these out a little more. Okay, that'll be fine. And what should we name our wolf? I think we'll name him Shaggy. All praise Shaggy. And we're playing with, I think, 7 AIs total. So we'll give ourselves 7 thrones, and we'll make it so that we need... and this, what you put here for ascension points is how many points worth of thrones we need to win. So if there's 7 level 2s, there's 14 thrones. So we can put, I'll put 8 here, which is reasonably easy. And that should work. We'll click OK. And it's going to sit here and think about where to put all the nations. And we've done it. We have picked our god. It is far from perfect, but it is the god we are going to play with. And when you start off, you can't see anybody in your cap circle. And so what you're going to do, there's a lot of hotkeys, I know. I'm going to try to refrain from just randomly using hotkeys without talking through some of it. The menu of all the things you can do are over here on the right. And there's a hotkey for everything here. And I'll be honest, I haven't clicked on one of these in probably a year. So if we want to recruit things, I don't actually know where that is. It's right here. You click on this, you have your province, whatever province you have selected, the flag's going to blink on it. You click on recruit units, and it's going to bring up the recruitment menu, and you get to choose what you're going to expand with. So in our case, we have a region bliss, so these giants are going to be super duper good. And I think we're just going to put these guys on repeat recruitment. The problem with the giants is right now we're in spring, and you can see this icon up here at the top. And the way temperature scales are going to work, it's going to be really important for us, temperature scales, is based on, like, you can see this yellow border is our dominion. Wherever our dominion is, it's going to push cold there. But the temperature scales are also going to be affected by the season. And so as we go through spring and come out into summer, things are going to heat up dramatically. And our sacreds, they also have cold power and ice protection. And while this is a bonus in cold scales, it is a malus in heat scales. So we got to be a little careful. We could recruit other things, and maybe that's ideal for year 1, but whatever. We're going to do what we want. Okay, guys? We are going to do what we want. What do we have in our army? Maybe we get another one of these guys. 40 gold, 30 gold. That's fine. Okay. And we could get a mage, but we're too poor. So, such is our life. Now we hit end turn, and that is going to bring us to the end of this first episode. So now we get to see all our neighbors. We'll talk about expansion in the next episode. So see you guys then.